How's it going, everyone? If you enjoy my videos, make sure you like, subscribe, and check out my channel for more. In this video, I show you the entirety of Florissant Avenue in the St. Louis area. This is significant as it's not only an original artery into downtown, but there's a stretch of the roadway that saw a majority of the Ferguson riots in 2014. I'll tell you all about it along the way. If you are unfamiliar with my videos, I do speed up my videos in order to show more in a less amount of time. You can always keep track of the time it takes me to drive on the bottom left corner of the screen. We do start the video in the very southern portion of the suburb of Florissant. Florissant has a population of about 51,000, which is down from its 1970 peak of 66,000. Regardless, it's a good middle-class suburb to settle down in, as it has a lower violent crime rate and property crime rate than the Missouri average. The average household income here is $53,000 per year. Florissant and Ferguson have a consolidated school district, and Niche.com ranks it as the 14th best out of 56 in the St. Louis area. Turns out that while I was editing this video, there is a water main break at this very spot, and it appeared as a geyser from I-270 below the roadway. Nonetheless, we are now in Ferguson. About 20,000 people live here, down from a peak population of 28,000 in 1970. The average household income here is $41,000 per year. The poverty rates are sort of high, as 20% of the residents are living in poverty. The city experiences a crime rate that is just slightly higher than the state average, so there are safer cities, but there are also more crime-ridden areas as well. The violent crime rate is 624 for every 100,000. The U.S. average is 381. The property crime rate is 4,578 for every 100,000, and for property crime, the U.S. average is 2,200. Up ahead, police have the road blocked for whatever reason, so I took a detour through a Ferguson neighborhood, which is good if you're curious about what the area looks like, and it really just looks like a normal neighborhood for the St. Louis area. Your chances of being able to turn left here are lower than your chances of winning the Powerball and moving to your dream oceanside home in San Diego. Somehow the car in front of me was able to. We now enter Dellwood for a very short amount of time. About 5,000 people live here, and the income and crime stats are almost identical to Ferguson. The St. Louis area is one of those metro areas that have a weird layout of suburbs. When you look at a map, you could be driving along the same road and re-enter the suburb that you had just exited a few minutes ago. I do slow down the video eventually when we approach the stretch of West Florissant Avenue that saw the Ferguson riots of 2014. On August 9th, 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown and a friend were walking in the middle of Canfield Drive. Officer Darren Wilson comes by after a robbery and assault was reported at nearby Ferguson Market and Liquor. Turns out that it was Brown who committed the crime. Nonetheless, the way I understand it is that it was not known at the time who it was that committed the crime. That's also not a crime that someone should lose their life over. Witnesses say that Brown had his hands up when the officer shot him, while the officer claims that Brown was attacking him. Residents put up a memorial in response with flowers and candles at the spot where Brown was killed. A police officer allowed their dog to urinate on the memorial, and then it was ran over by police vehicles as the memorial was in the exact spot that Brown was killed, which was on Canfield Drive. The next day, protests and riots broke out as they looted nearby stores, smashed car windows, burned buildings, and taunted officers. The incident fueled the movement that began in 2012 when a black teenager, Trayvon Martin, was shot and killed in Florida by a neighborhood watch volunteer. Back to the Ferguson riots on August 11th, police fired tear gas and rubber bullets to try and separate a crowd of protesters. After almost 2 months of protests and riots, Ferguson's White Police Chief Tom Jackson released a video apology to Brown's family and wanted to march with the protesters. That move didn't go as planned, as moments after, Ferguson police officers scuffled with demonstrators and arrested one. On November 14th, a state of emergency was declared over the matter and the National Guard came into town for a second time. On November 24th, the grand jury decided not to indict Officer Wilson who shot and killed Brown, and as a response to that, what were peaceful protests earlier in the day turned out to be violent. More buildings and more cars were burned, people are attacking police officers, and even the St. Louis Lambert International Airport had canceled some inbound flights. On November 29th, Wilson resigned from the police force. Police Chief Tom Jackson resigned after on March 11, 2015. The next day, 2 police officers were shot in front of the Ferguson Police Department, which is west of here. With all of that said, hopefully we do continue to see less police brutality incidences and fewer incidences of police officers shooting people that don't deserve to be killed. This part of Florissant Avenue is referred to as West Florissant Avenue to avoid confusion with South Florissant Road, which is further west. Both roads serve as main thoroughfares, however Florissant Avenue, which is the one that we are on, goes all the way to downtown St. Louis. We are currently in Jennings, which has a population of 14,000, down from a 1960 peak of 20,000. The average household income here is $32,000 per year, and 21% of residents are living in poverty. Crime stats are almost equivalent to that of Ferguson. And we are now within the city limits of St. Louis, Missouri, home to the beautiful Gateway Arch. It's also now the most dangerous large city in the United States, taking Detroit's previous spot. Detroit is now the second most dangerous and Baltimore is the third most violent. I filmed this video on April 3rd, 2020, and about a month later after that, a weekend in this city consisted of 15 shootings, and it sounds like some of them were random, and it's very sad for the 2 who were fatally shot out of the 15 shootings. Just about all of the shootings occurred on St. Louis's north side, which is known to be the worst part of the city. 2 of them occurred along the road we're driving, West Florissant Avenue. One happened at Lee's Chicken, which was back by Goodfellow Boulevard, and another happened along this roadway near Adelaide Avenue, which is further along in the video. St. Louis has a violent crime rate of 2,082 per every 100,000 residents, and as I mentioned before, that makes it the most violent large city in the U.S. Detroit has 2,057 per every 100,000, and Baltimore has 2,027 for every 100,000. Despite the crime stats, there are some stats here that aren't as bad. The average household income here is $41,000 a year, and 24% of the residents are in poverty. Those aren't good numbers necessarily, but congratulations, St. Louis. You can still brag about being better than Detroit in that matter. St. Louis can also brag about having 35% of its 25 and older population owning a bachelor's degree or higher. As you've been seeing some of the beautiful old buildings, it's a reminder of the fact that St. Louis has had a peak population of 856,000 in 1950. The city was the fourth largest in the country back in the 1900 U.S. Census. In 1920, it was the sixth largest. In 1940, it was the eighth largest. And the last time that it was in the top 10 was in 1960, when it was the 10th largest. Today, 302,000 people live in the city limits, less than half of its peak. The metro area has not necessarily seen a loss in population, but it hasn't grown that much either, staying stagnant around 2.8 million people. As the St. Louis Arch starts to be visible, we're also starting to approach a section of the city that has many blocks of vacant land. A lot of the blocks in this part of the city only have a few buildings left standing, if any at all, very similar to many of the Detroit neighborhoods. Many streets throughout this part of St. Louis have makeshift blockades like this one here to not let vehicles drive through the residential streets. This is an attempt to lower crime on said streets, but who knows how well that really works. And as we skim the outskirts of downtown St. Louis, this is where Florissant Avenue ends, and it's where I end the video. If you enjoy my videos, make sure you like, subscribe, and check out my channel for more. We'll see you next time. Peace!